Let's start it. All right. Hello and welcome to another Move with a Doc. I'm Dr. Rupa Shah, I'm a family physician and health and wellness coach. And as always, during these sessions, as you're listening, try to just move, get some walking in, maybe just stretch as you listen in today as we talk about healthy snacking. So let's admit it. We all love a good snack. I mean, who doesn't? Especially these days while we're all working at home. We start our days super early. We work hard. We just engage our brains really hard. And it's inevitable that during the day, we're going to get hungry and we're going to start looking for a snack. We all do it. I'm sure I'll be doing it in the next hour or two here as well. So I wanted to, I thought a lot about this talk and where I wanted to take it. And what I wanted to focus on during this talk is number one, why do we do this like mindless munching, as I call it, and how can we avoid it? And then number two, what are some healthy snack options that we can choose, so we can choose and make some better choices for ourselves. And lastly, I just wanted to incorporate number three, one strategy that's quite popular right now on how to avoid some mindless snacking and can actually be really beneficial to your health as well. So I'll get into that towards the end. So those are kind of the three areas we're going to focus on. Hold your questions till the end. I think you guys might have some, and then we can sort of chat as well. So that'll be really fun. Okay, so as I start, I really wanted to start with the bigger question, which is, why do we snack? I mean, if we're eating our 3 meals a day, why are we snacking? Why are we constantly hungry? And most of us think, well, we snack naturally because we are hungry. And that can be true. That actually can be true. But let's be honest, there's a lot of other times that we eat for lots of other reasons that aren't because we're hungry. We're eating because we're bored, we're stressed, we might have some anxiety, we might have some depression, and sometimes we eat and snack just because the food is right there literally in front of us. As more of us have been working from home and working remotely, it's so much easier to take a break from our office space, wander into the kitchen, and mindlessly grab something to eat just because we can. And some of us may actually literally be working, we might be working in the kitchen itself, at the dining table, in fact, which makes it even that much more appealing to, just have access to those snacks in our pantry. So my first challenge for you as you go forward throughout your day and throughout this week is when you start reaching for that snack and kind of walking through your kitchen, just ask yourself, are you really hungry right now? Or maybe you are just feeling you're bored, you needed to stretch your legs, and maybe you're stressed. Maybe you're trying to avoid that email and that intense work that is in front of you for the rest of the day. So one little trick that I try and do, which is, one that a lot of folks will recommend, is just grab a glass of water. Get a big glass of water, drink it, wait a couple of minutes, and then see if you're still truly hungry. Even try and incorporate maybe some deep breathing. Take some nice deep inhales and then some nice long exhales. The exhalation portion of our breathing can really help relax us, lower that cortisol, and maybe make you realize that, you know what, yeah, I wasn't hungry. I'm just really stressed right now. A nice thing right now, while the weather is really nice, try and do some of that deep breathing outside and just clear your head for a second. That's been really helpful to me when I've just been mindlessly wanting to walk into the pantry and grab some of the kids' school snacks and stuff. So try that. And of course, if that doesn't work in a few minutes and you find yourself actually hungry, then grab a snack. So now let's move on to, okay, you're hungry. Why are you hungry? And it seems like kind of a rhetorical question, but really let's think about that. This is a loaded question. I purposely, am sort of wanting to delve a little bit into this because the concept of hunger is actually quite a complicated one. In fact, the entire act of eating and what subsequently happens in the brain after you eat is so fascinating and extremely complex. And without getting into too much excruciating detail today, I did want to make this talk a little bit about a high-level overview about what happens in the brain when we eat, because I think some of this is going to be new to most of you, but it's really quite interesting. And as I learn more about the concepts of obesity medicine, I just really do want to educate people more on the topic because we are seeing it more in the lay press. A lot of the new weight loss medications, you're going to hear some words and hormones and terms thrown around. And I just think the better educated you are, the more this might make a little bit more sense to you. So let's start with the basics. The regulation of food is a super complex process that occurs in your brain, okay? And specifically, the area in the brain is your hypothalamus, okay? And if you're a science nerd, which some of you may be, this happens even more specifically with actions in the what's called the POMC neuron, POMC neuron. And the AGRP, which is an acronym for the agouti-related peptide neuron. So the POMC neuron, the AGRP neuron, these send signals in the periventricular neuron to other parts of the brain. So when you eat, there's this entire cascade of hormonal actions that start happening. But the point that I want you to remember is that this all happens in your brain, okay? So our brain is very important. And again, I'll just add back, when you're stressed, when you're anxious, when you're depressed, all of these have actions on our brain to trigger hunger for different reasons. So this is all happening in our brain, but let's talk about the few key players, just real brief, okay? And I'm going to start with the adipokines, okay? So this is a word you're going to hear more about, and you may have heard these two most popular adipokines, leptin and adiponectin, okay? There are also some gastrointestinal peptides, GIPs, that are stimulated by what you eat, okay? So we'll get into those later, but I'm going to focus on leptin. And leptin you may have heard of. This is the new fat hormone, okay? So you've probably heard about leptin, and leptin increases with obesity. It binds to a leptin receptor in the hypothalamus, and it can promote fat loss, okay? So its job is to tell your brain how much energy is already on board in your body. But as you may have already figured out, there's a lot of dysregulation of leptin signaling in our brains, just like there is with irregularities in insulin resistance that leads to diabetes and such too. But leptin is an important hormone when we talk about obesity, hunger, and those types of things. The other one is adiponectin, like I just mentioned. And adiponectin is actually low in obesity, and it's an insulin sensitizer. And that's a good thing. We want our bodies to be sensitized to the insulin that we have. So if you just want to remember one thing, higher adiponectin means lower insulin resistance, okay? And that's what we want, okay? Now I'm going to mention, I talked about there was the adipokines, leptin and adiponectin, and then I said there's some gastrointestinal peptides as well. I don't want to talk about, there's a lot of them, but the only one you need to know is ghrelin. And you may have heard this in the lay press lately in some of the articles in the New York Times and such, but ghrelin stands for growth hormone release inducing peptide. Ghrelin. That's kind of its acronym, okay? And if you want to think about ghrelin, the way I remember it is ghrelin. It's Grhrelin. So ghrelin or grow. You can associate it like that way. They think of it, grow or growling stomach, okay? So basically, ghrelin is what gets induced and gives us those hunger pangs, okay? It's secreted in the stomach, and it tells us when we're hungry. So that's why it's called the hunger hormone. Okay, it's at its highest peak just before we eat. Okay, so again, it does tell, like, it'll rise and it'll be like your stomach's growling, time to eat. Okay, there's a lot of ghrelin. So again, this hormone is the highest when it's been a long time since we've eaten. Okay, so that's normal. If you haven't eaten for a while, you're going to have high ghrelin levels. And it's also high when we're on diets that are too calorie restrictive. So they've done studies on this, and ghrelin will be high in those folks that are trying to lower their calories too low, because it's your body's way of getting you back to your set point. Okay, so that's ghrelin. Okay, so if I've lost you up until now, that's okay. But here's the part where I want you to kind of focus back in, okay? Pay attention for just 1 second. So ghrelin, this hormone that I talked about, is suppressed the longest when you eat protein, okay? So I'll say that one more time. Ghrelin is suppressed the longest by protein. And again, ghrelin signals you to feel hungry and to eat, but we can suppress it by protein. It's suppressed the fastest by carbohydrates, but then it will rebound. Okay. So you're thinking, who cares, Dr. Shah? What does this mean? Well, if we extrapolate this, what this could mean is that we could all benefit from a higher protein breakfast or our first meal of the day to help suppress our hunger throughout the day, and therefore less episodes of snacking throughout the day, kind of mindlessly, okay, if we're doing that. Now, if you haven't eaten enough calories, you're going to have circulating ghrelin. It's going to tell your body you need to eat. But I wanted to mention that because I thought it was super fascinating, super interesting that the studies have shown that ghrelin is suppressed the fastest by carbohydrate meals, but the longest by protein meals, okay? I'll circle right back around super quick to the other gastrointestinal peptides that I mentioned earlier here, just so you've heard them. You don't need to know all these, but the other GIPs or gastrointestinal peptides, we have amylin, we have CCK, we have one called GLP-1. That's super interesting. If any of you who are who have diabetes, you might be on a GLP-1 agonist medication, okay? There's GIP and PYY. Anyways, I'm not gonna talk about this, very technical. I just wanted to mention those, and also just to realize how complicated, again, the act of eating, the act of satiety, and the act of just feeling full really, really is, okay? But do remember ghrelin. Okay, so now I want to move on to really kind of what this talk was, I think, meant to be for, which is what are some healthy snacking options? So if you really are hungry and you need to snack, what are the types of things that we should be kind of eating? I think we already realized that high calorie foods that are calorie dense and that are high in sugars are not going to be our healthiest snack options. These are going to lead to unnecessary weight gain. They're also going to have that pro-inflammatory effect on your body, which is going to cause other downstream health problems that we've talked about before. They're going to add to our insulin resistance and higher blood sugars as well. So what should we be focusing on? Okay. And this is always a struggle, right? Like, what do you buy at the grocery store that you want to snack on later throughout the day? Well, fruits and vegetables are always a great option. I think most of us realize that. Things like apples, pears, carrots, celery sticks. Remember, these foods all have a lot of fiber, and fiber is our friend because fiber also keeps us full longer. Bell pepper slices, zucchinis, cucumbers, broccoli, cauliflower. Again, they have a lot of fiber. You're gonna feel like you're full for longer, and that's what we want. Some other good options: nuts and seeds. Don't forget about those. These are super great. These are a good source of those good fats. When we talk about good fats, we're talking about your high density lipoprotein, your HDL. And when you get your cholesterol, your lipid panel, your doctor is going to tell you, here's your total cholesterol, here's your triglycerides, here's your HDL. That's your good cholesterol that you want higher. And then there's your bad cholesterol, the LDL, that most of us want lower. But nuts are a good source of HDL. But your two that you should focus on are almonds and walnuts. I love cashews, but they're like really high in fat. So I'll just eat a small handful of those sometimes. And this is a great option to keep at your office because they stay so well. So I always keep some almonds, walnuts, and some cashews at my office when I get hungry. Another good option, plain unsweetened Greek yogurt is a really convenient work snack. If you have a little fridge, you can just keep that in there. Again, it's higher in protein. It's going to suppress that ghrelin for you. So a 6-ounce container plain low-fat Greek yogurt has about 17 grams of protein, and that's only 140 calories. So that's amazing. It's loaded with calcium, which is also good for our bones. And then if you add some things to that, like some fruits or some nuts, I think it's an amazing way to start your day. You can even consider for a snack a smoothie with greens, spinach, whatever other greens you want to put in it. You can try some seeds like chia seeds and then berries. That can be a really great snack with lots of fiber. Cottage cheese is another great snack. Carrots with hummus is great. One that I like that I kind of will go in spurts is smoked salmon. Really nutritious, rich in protein, and high in those omega-3s that we want. Remember, omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatory, and omega-6s that we find in all the cooking oils and French fries and pizza and stuff are omega-6s. Those are bad. We don't want those. Omega-3s are the foods that we want to focus on, and smoked salmon is a really good source of that. Other great things, hard-boiled eggs. We know avocados have our good HDL. Those are good fats, so focusing on that. Another one that I forget about a lot are those tuna pouches are really nice and convenient. They don't need to be drained. They can be stored in I store them in my drawer at work again, and you can just eat them at work with some whole grain crackers. That can be just a nice quick lunch too. Again, it's high in protein and high in those omega-3s. So a good option for you. Couple other favorites that I sort of keep at the office, Skinny Pop. I've been big into that. I already mentioned I like my cashews, some nuts, flavored almonds are another big one that I've been into. Granola, a flavored seltzer water. Again, when I'm stressed, I'll try and reach for a flavored water and drink that because I know I'm not always hungry. I just am looking for that kind of oral fixation because I'm just wanting to do something. And again, keeping those tuna pouches is another big one I've started doing. And then smoked salmon. Anytime I've done a quick Costco run, they have some great smoked salmon there, and I'll bring that to work for lunch too. Okay, as promised, I know we're running out of time. I just wanted to touch on a trend that's really big right now, and that is intermittent fasting. And I mentioned this in this talk because I think it is super helpful as we're talking about snacking and that mindless eating that we all do. So there's different versions of it, and I probably use the term incorrectly. We shouldn't just say intermittent. It's really time-restricted eating. But there's different ways to say it. So we can talk about alternate day fasting, which is where you eat normally one day and then you might fast the next day. So alternate day fasting versus time-restricted feeding. And what I'm really talking about when I say intermittent fasting is time-restricted feeding. And that just means that you're eating every day in a restricted time window. And for most people, what's generally doable is an 8-hour window of eating. And the most popular of the intermittent fasting time restricted feeding is a 16-8. You fast for 16 hours and you only eat for 8. Okay, so a 16-8. There's other versions of this, but I like the 16-8, and it's personally what I like to do. I want to mention one study that was done to see whether intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding, they compared it to a continuous energy restriction. Basically, that means being on a very calorie-restricted diet. And they looked to that. They looked at the continuous energy restriction versus time-restricted feeding to see the effects on weight loss. Okay, so they looked at 11 studies. And this is so interesting. that 9 out of the 11 showed no difference in weight loss or body fat loss between those two groups. So basically, time-restricted feeding isn't necessarily going to help you with weight loss, okay? And there's been some recent studies that have come out recently to show that, because it's become quite a fad recently to like, oh, everyone should intermittent fast and time restrict feed because that's going to help you with weight loss. Not necessarily, okay? But it can be, in my opinion, a very helpful tool for people that need a little bit of structure to their day. And people that do a lot of snacking, especially after dinner, in the late hours when you're watching TV, you're putting on Netflix. It's a really big issue for folks, and a lot of my patients I see. In fact, I'm horrible. I will always want ice cream or a bowl of cereal before bed, more of a habit than out of even hunger. So when I'm really doing well with intermittent fasting, I know it helps me maintain weight. So again, I think this is a great strategy for people to help maintain weight and avoid that mindless snacking. And I know I just said it doesn't help with weight loss per se, okay, but there are other benefits of intermittent fasting on our body organs, particularly like liver and other organs, even if it doesn't help with the weight loss. So there's a lot of other I don't want to get into the details of that either, but there is some benefit to allowing your organs that have to do a lot of digestion throughout the day to allow them some rest with a nice 16-hour fast overnight. There is some other benefits to that, okay? Even if weight loss may not be one of them, but weight loss itself actually just is really mostly related to energy balance, meaning you basically do need a calorie restriction to lose weight, no matter how you do that. But again, I think it's a great strategy to help with avoiding extra calories in the evening for people. I just want to mention a quick other study that was it's older, from 2014, from the Obesity Journal, that looked at high calorie intake at breakfast versus high caloric intake at dinner. I thought this one was really interesting as well. And they looked at the effect on weight loss in overweight and obese women. It was a 12-week randomized clinical trial that used overweight and obese women. And they found that women that were randomized to consume more of their calories and energy earlier in the day lost more weight. Okay, so negative 8.7 kilos versus negative 3.7 kilos in the group, respectively. So again, the 8.7 refers to the women that ate more of their calories earlier in the day. So potentially eating more of your calories earlier in their day could also help with weight management. And it may be that this mechanism, they felt, the researchers in this study, that this may be influenced by some circadian rhythms and timings of hormonal release in the body. So super fascinating. And I alluded to all of this earlier when I started my talk about just how complicated the system in our brain, in the hypothalamus, is with eating. So I just wanted to throw that in there as you're thinking about, well, how do I time my calories throughout the day? When should I be snacking? When should I be eating? And there is some research to support the fact that getting some of your calories earlier in the day may be beneficial if you're looking to lose weight. And I know this talk isn't about weight loss and it's about snacking, but I felt like it all tied in together. So I went a little long. Let's get to the take-home points. Number one, before you eat, take a moment, do some deep breathing, make sure you're truly hungry before you snack, okay? Two, try and focus on a healthy, nutritious breakfast that is high in protein, so you can avoid feeling hungry earlier on in the day. Remember, this relates back to our friend ghrelin, the hunger hormone, okay? We can suppress ghrelin longer with protein. Number three, you might want to consider time-restricted eating, time-restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, whatever you want to call it. I just call it intermittent fasting because it's easier. Might want to consider this to help you if you're a mindless muncher later in the day, especially after dinner. Again, when most people like to snack after they eat their dinner and they're watching TV, intermittent fasting can be useful. And again, try and get most of your really good, healthy, nutritious calories earlier in the day, because this can help with weight management, weight stability, and avoid further weight gain. And then also helpfully avoid with unhealthy snacking later in the day. And I've given you some options from some healthy snacks, and I'm sure folks have other great ideas as well. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you again for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.